whenever you sent the email about, our conversation, because it started off as just one thing you posted about love languages.
Yeah.
And it was really relevant because I simply just had this realization about love languages that we'll get into, literally 2 days before. So when you posted that, I was like, oh, wow, that's creepy.
I was watching you.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, I see you, girl. But then whenever you emailed about this episode and talked about motherhood and unhealed, inner child work and unhealed trauma and all this kind of stuff, I was like, oh, wow. Yes. Yes. That resonates so hard because I feel like that's been my entire motherhood journey that nobody prepared me for. And now that I'm, almost 3 years into it, I really feel like, the note on my phone literally said, I was unprepared for how radically transformative motherhood is. And it was so eye-opening. And then it was literally almost inside of myself, this whole person that I knew was standing on top of a false floor. And then motherhood lifted up a rug and showed me a door and opened up the door and was like, by the way, you're down there, have fun.
Oh.
So
You're listening to the Better Relationships After Baby podcast, where I believe your relationship can be stronger than ever after having a baby. It just takes tools, conversation, and support to help you get there. I'm Chelsea Skaggs, certified life and relationship coach, mom of 2, and survivor and thriver of tough relationship challenges after babies. I'm committed to helping couples just like you improve your communication skills, connection points, and personal confidence so that you can have the life and family you've always dreamt of. Now, let's get to today's episode.
2 minutes in and I'm already a little teary-eyed, so this is probably going to be one of those episodes that's just mom to mom, human to human. This is what we are going through and often don't have a lot of spaces to talk about. So welcome back, parents, to the Better Relationships After Baby podcast, where we talk about how and why your relationship gets to get better after having a baby. And I don't sugarcoat it. I don't pretend like it's this magical unveiling of a new box that just pops open with a surprise of love and joy and laughter all the time. But we very intentionally have this opportunity to get to know ourselves in a new way and get to know our partners in a new way and really level up our relationship with ourselves and with our partners. So today I am joined by Jordan, who I fell in love with because she also has a podcast and she did an episode with her partner, and I was just laughing, weeping, feeling like I was sitting with a best friend as I was listening to it. And I literally messaged her and was like, hi, you have no choice. You're going to be my friend. And so here we are. Jordan, will you introduce a little bit about who you are, what you do, and who makes up your family?
So I am a nurse. I started out in peds and now I'm currently a neonatal nurse. And one of the things that I have always had on my heart is maternal and infant healthcare. Ever since I was 16, I did a lot of work in refugee healthcare, working with specifically moms and children, vulnerable populations, the whole 9 yards is just my jam. And so I want to say about 8-ish months ago, I personally had a really traumatic birth, and the lack of resources and support after that was so eye-opening that I sat there. And then whenever I was working with all my moms in the NICU, I said, wow, we have got to do better postpartum wise. So I'm attempting with my podcast, and I have a blog, and I'm starting the journey into kind of creating my own model of postpartum care and trying locally and stuff like that. So that's me. in a very short blurb. And then, so I have a daughter. She will be 3 in September. And she's absolutely marvelous. She's absolutely wild. Actually, she's naked and barefoot in the front yard right now, which is exactly how I love her. And then I have my husband, and I've actually known him since I was 16. Wow. So we have a very long history, and I actually love our relationship story. We've had lots of ups and downs, and I think parenthood in general has been the biggest relationship boot camp ever. But I feel like and it's not like a building every day type of thing. I feel like we go through these intense periods of change, and then we'll kind of like even out, and then we'll go through another period where I'm like, oh wow, we have got some crap to work out. And, you know, and so those ebbs and flows, it's been interesting, and I love going on that ride with him. So I hope he says the same about me. He's probably like, you make me do too much work internally, woman.
Well, I had commented to you after listening to your podcast episode with him that he was very open and was sharing and seemed super insightful. And I think you said, well, it hasn't always been that way, but maybe parenthood or something else brought him into that space.
Probably me. So I have always been an incredibly introspective person, and I hold myself to a very high standard of like trying to be honest in who I am, and like doing that work and trying to figure out how I can better in my relationships with both myself and other people. And so he is the complete opposite of me, in the fact that I am like this very intense, wild, adventurous, just like spontaneous, crazy person. And he's like, cool, like, yeah, life's chill. I'm good. He's so chill and so even. And the thing about him is that he might not always be like insightful in himself or even introspective, but he's very open to that. Like I will literally say, hey, we're going to go out to the desert for 10 days and go on a crazy vacation. And he's like, oh yeah, sure. You know, and that's kind of how he is on emotional stuff too. I'll sit down and be like, so we need to have like a talk, like not you're in trouble talk, but like I have a lot on my mind. And he's like, all right, you know, and he's ready for it. And he might have trouble, you know, like on my podcast, how I said, I think it's important when you have big conversations to let someone process. Like that's something he's taught me, because I used to be like, dump all this stuff on him, and he's not a very, like, he has to process that. And I'd be like, okay, how do you feel? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? You know? And so like learning that, it's funny. So I have definitely pushed him in trying to make us better, to learn more about himself, which has been an interesting journey for him too. So.
Oh man. Yeah. So it sounds like you're the external processor. He's the internal processor, which can be hard to navigate. These big conversations when we are taking in and giving back information in different ways. But I love how you have identified that it sounds like working with that. So that's exciting.
Yes, it's funny because every now and then, like, he will, and it's just important, and just accepting your partner, I think, is one of the biggest things that they can't really change about themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, every now and then, and also accepting your reaction to it sometimes, and, you know, and communicating that, because sometimes I will be super emotional and I will be talking to him and he'll just stare at me. And I'm like, okay, you got to do something. And he's just like looking at me, and he's processing, and that's fine. But I'm like, okay, I gotta walk away because I can't handle your staring at me right now. Like, you're giving nothing back. But, you know, it's just more of, I know that's how he is. And then he'll come back a couple hours later, and then we'll talk again. And so I forgive myself when I'm like, I can't handle you right now, just staring at me. But then I also like allow him that space.
Oh my gosh. That is like number one gem to just restate, is that we have to accept a lot of things about our partners, and stop putting so much energy into trying to change them. Now, I mean, obviously there are like harmful habits that need intervention, but things like the way we process information is just a part of who we are, and the resistant energy we use to try to make our partners do that differently is energy we could probably use in other ways.
Oh, for sure. It's interesting. I mean, one thing that I have learned, especially with him, I am a huge advocate for over communicating, not in like that people pleaser way, like over explaining yourself, but like over communicating, because I don't think you can ever do that too much. And an example of that is literally the other day. So I typically do all of my work stretches or my days in a row. So I will be gone for 5 days in a row. I work nights, I work 12-hour shifts. So I'm just basically sleeping and working for 5 days. And so I'm in the kitchen and there's a bunch of laundry. And my husband is a people pleaser himself, and we're working on this. And he rarely asks for anything he needs. And for me, that's a huge source of anxiety, because I'm like, if you don't tell me what you need, I can't help you. And then I have this terrible fear that you're going to resent me one day, but you never allowed me to like prevent that, you know? So we're working on him telling me what he needs. So he walks by the laundry and is like, hey, if you could throw in a load of laundry, that would be great. If not, it's fine. And all of a sudden I have this like intense anxiety, emotional reaction to that. Like, whoa, what do you mean it's fine? You either want me to do the laundry or you don't. Like, you gotta. And so he's like, whoa, where did that come from? And I said, oh, okay, hold on. Let me take a second. I clearly have a lot going through my mind. And then I just started explaining to him like, hey, that was a mixed message and blah, blah, blah. And this turned into a 30-minute conversation over a comment about laundry.
Of course.
But I advocate for that, because had I not sat there and explained why I had this emotional reaction, I would have been mad at him for the whole day and not even gotten his perspective, and he would have not understood, and that would have just kept going, you know? And so I that's probably the biggest thing about me that maybe he loves and maybe he hates at the same time, but I'm always an over communicator.
Yeah. I love to hear that, because I am obsessed with communication. And I think that sometimes people don't slow down to have these conversations because they think they don't have time, right? And being a new parent is little time, little energy, little space. Yes, but the time you take to get a clear understanding and be able to shift patterns and expectations in the future, those 30 minutes save so much time in the long run. So I love hearing about those very clear conversations. Okay, I want to make a little shift here. And that was just so fun to get inside your home a little bit and like hear that back and forth. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to have some moms who like screenshot this and they're like, that's exactly what happens in my house too. So if you're listening and that's you, let Jordan and I know that those kind of patterns resonate with you and that maybe you got some new insight on how to work with them. Jordan, earlier we were talking about this kind of awakening that happens in motherhood. And the way that I look at it is that it's almost like this unfair trick of the universe that we are given this really hard, vulnerable, sweet, precious, complex time when we have this new baby and we're raising these children. And simultaneously, for many of us, it seems, the universe is like, also, like, here's all your unhealed trauma and the story of your life that you haven't faced. And so now, if you really want to show up as a parent, you should probably start working on these things. Bad timing, it seems like, but it's kind of how it hits.
It's funny because I love therapy. It has been the most life-changing thing I've ever done for myself. And I started back in July, whenever my daughter was about 1.5 years. And so I would absolutely advocate for people to, you know, for women that know they want to have children, to maybe do a spot of therapy before motherhood. It would absolutely help. but I don't think you can actually prepare for the insane shift that happens in motherhood, because all of a sudden, like, for example, even something so small, and on a positive note, I'm not a patient person. I never have been. And then I get my daughter, and for some reason, I can have the most incredible patience ever. And not even like I'm forcing it. Like, it's just this natural patience where I'm like, oh, yeah, this is fine. We're good. Like, here, we're going to, and I'm like, who is this person? You know? So on one hand, it's wonderful. I feel like that shift. But on the other hand, you know, so many people sit there and focus on, oh, you know, you are going to have this baby and you're going to meet this baby. And it's like, hey, by the way, you're going to meet someone new too. It's going to be yourself. Have fun with that.
Yes. And you're going to live with them every second of the day.
Yep.
And you're going to make decisions you've never made before and face challenges you've never faced before.
Yep. It's insane. And it's uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable. Like, I've had so many, like, getting real vulnerable, so many times where I have just all of a sudden burst into tears because it's gotten to a point where I am feeling or changing or discovering so much that it's so overwhelming that I just lose it. And then I think, what the heck? Like, okay, this is fun. Great. I'm bawling in my kitchen, or I just pulled in the driveway and all of a sudden I burst into tears. Like, what is going on here? You know, and it's those moments of, especially on drives, I often cry in the driveway. I don't know if anybody else does out there. Please tell me I'm not alone. But I feel like, you know, in the car is my safe space. No one's bugging me. I have no distractions. I can think, and then I'll pull in the driveway and I'm just like sobbing. So it's been an interesting ride, especially going and doing that therapy has taught me so much about myself, because I was noticing all these emotional reactions and patterns and thought patterns that I was not okay with, but even though I could understand that they're happening, I couldn't quite figure out how to stop them or how to change them. And so I said, okay, you know, I've done the most work I can by myself. I need someone else's perspective. And God bless my therapist. I love her. And through doing that, it completely changed my world, myself, and my relationship. So it's thanks, motherhood.
Oh, it's so relevant and so real. It's easy to kind of brush by some of these things when well, of course we're still individuals, but when we're, you know, individuals not responsible for the livelihood and the well-being of another human, and that next level, entering motherhood, kind of calls us into, I think, accountability and the need to know, what do you actually want out of life? What are your values? What are you trying to do here? Where are you trying to go? And it opens up all of these doors, and I'm going to ask you some more questions and get into that. But first, I want to say, for anyone who is maybe on the verge of this or hasn't started to open doors, I like to say that the warning, and it's worth it, but when you start unpacking things, like, it kind of is like that Jack in the Box that then has like 5 other things that pop out after Jack does. I don't know if that's real, but that's what the picture is in my head. But things keep coming to the surface, and it's a journey. This is not like, hey, I realize I have this tendency, so let me go get this healed, taken care of, Band-Aid, check mark, on with my life. It's like layers and layers of undoing and unraveling and putting pieces back together. It's a journey, and I just say that out front because I think that we have to be prepared to not just have like a insta fix or insta healing, but to really normalize this journey of being people who are returning to ourselves in a lot of ways.
I love that warning, because I started therapy in January, and then by February we had done so much progress. I was in a great place. I was like, this is amazing. So we stopped therapy. And then about a month ago, like, I don't know, my emotional world decided to go, hey, you started to work on your inner child. Well, now your inner teenager's coming out to play, and she's here and she has a lot to say. And I felt like my emotional world imploded again. So I restarted therapy, and I sat there to my therapist and said, I was doing so well. And she's like, oh, so you're human and you have more things to discover. I'm like, stop it. I don't want to be human.
I really thought I was superhuman here.
Like, I was good. I fixed myself. Okay. Right. I was done.
I've thought that so many times. Like, I thought I had already fixed myself.
And it's like, you know, you keep going down that steps, you know, and discovering new things. So just this, it's amazing because you do add so much dimension to yourself, and you learn so much about yourself as a person when you become a mom and have that new profound relationship. But it's also really important, and I have to tell myself this all the time, that you are literally always in the process of becoming somebody. And like that never stops. And if you, I mean, and honestly, you wouldn't want it to stop, you know, because if you just stopped growing, like, that's kind of boring and not effective. But at the same time, I think that's sometimes a hard truth to kind of sit with, where it's like, okay, I'm doing all this work and this is honestly kind of exhausting and I want it to be done. And it's like, no, you're never done.
Sorry, honey, this is not how it works. Jordan, you brought up earlier and in conversation with me how you had kind of had this realization around how you accept and desire love, and maybe that being a little blocked for a while because of some unhealed things. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that revelation and that experience of, again, kind of returning to yourself?
That was very interesting for me. So I have to think of how, like, where I'm going with this. Okay. So I had always, growing up and in my teenage and young adulthood, I'm 29, so still young adult, I'm saying. But I had always been like, oh, I hate being touched. I don't like people touching me, blah, 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 blah. That was just in my mind. And then I had always just thought that my love language was acts of service. Now, to caveat this, you know, we all have inner child wounds, and I love my mother. But the way that I was brought up was, you know, very conditional to how my mom wanted to receive her love was by doing things for her. And that's was, you know, she'd often say like, oh, I do this and this and this for you and you're ungrateful. And so there was a lot of like guilt associated and shame and this kind of thing. And so I really felt like to justify my existence, essentially, I had to give back and give something and do something. And so that's how I always was conditioned to believe that was the best way to give and show love. And so this realization of how I actually truly wanted to desire love and see and receive love happened in the kitchen where, you know, everyday places. And my husband had walked in the kitchen and he just like gave me this quick kiss on the cheek and then started breakfast. And all of a sudden I like burst into tears. And I thought to myself, what is being triggered right now? Because clearly it's something. And so he turns around, he's like, what the heck? What is going on? I'm like, I don't even know. Just I need a little bit. And so this was right around the same time that I just commented on, again, this tumultuous emotional upheaval that I was having, where I was needing to uncover things. And this event, this love language realization, was actually what pushed me back to therapy. So I was like, all right, cool. Like, I did some work, I was good. And now that I've done that work, clearly there's other crap that's coming up. So after I had calmed down enough, I had realized that the thing that set me off was the fact that his good morning was just this like super brief, quick kiss on the cheek. It wasn't very tender. It wasn't very affectionate. And all of a sudden, this complete light bulb, I sat there and thought, I want more touch. I thought, what the heck? Like, what? I've always hated touch. What is this? And so through doing a lot more work, I realized, I am actually an incredibly physically affectionate person to a very small handful of people. And it's funny because my husband has even commented, like, you can be a little spider monkey. You'll just like climb on top of me and wrap your arms and just lay there. And I thought, wow, actually, I am like that. And I seek that out a lot. And I never realized that. And then that realization led me to believe that, or realize that, the reason I have always said I hated touch was because it actually is deeply meaningful to me. And so people's like offhanded or not offhanded, but like brief or how do I want to put that? Like not meaning it, or inauthentic. Touching, like, how people are just like, some people are just touchy with everyone and they just do it just to do it. And that's fine. But whenever I'm touched, it means something to me, whether it's like holding hands or a hug or playing with my hair or whatever. And so I would get emotionally invested in whoever would be touching me. And so then I think that I grew up and had that block of like, oh, I hate people touching me, because then that emotional vulnerability wouldn't be there. And so when I had that realization, I went to my husband and I was like, yeah, so I want you to touch me and I want you to touch me all the time. And this is how I like receive love now. And he's like, okay, cool. I've known you for 13 years. So this is a big change. But I just sat there and thought, okay, like, yeah, actually, this is who I am. And it was because I was conditioned to believe love was one thing, that I never really got to meet the girl that was inside going, hey, this is actually what love means to you and how you see love. And she's here and she's like greatly freaking neglected. And she bawled in the kitchen and now she's working on it. So
oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful story of how we see a part of ourselves, we make these connections. And I love that you had the safety to be able to communicate that to your partner. And something that I wonder, well, I actually know because I see this in some couples I work with, but we maybe forget that we're both changing people, no matter how long we've been together. So there shouldn't be, or there needs not to be, well, you've always done this or you've always done this. And a work that I like to help people do is to release some older versions of their partner. I know my husband and I used to get caught in that, and we'd say, well, this is just the way you are, or you always respond this way, or you have, a mindset about it that's this way. And we started to see the areas where we hadn't recognized each other's growth and we hadn't almost accepted the updated version of one another. Just like our computers, like they need an update. We go through updates, but sometimes we still see our partners in their old operating system.
It's a form of complacency almost, and it's so true, because just like moms go through this deeply transformative time, so do partners. They are also parents, and parenthood across the board, whether you birth the kid or not, is an incredibly deeply transformative time. And then once you start meeting those new versions of yourself, through the inner child and the trauma work that I've been doing, I mean, my I love my husband. He's such a patient man, because the past 8 months or so that I've been in therapy has been a wild ride for both me, him, and each other as a unit. And it's so true, because you can't sit there and say like, oh, well, you've always done this, because now you're either healing that pattern. And so that's hey, almost giving forgiveness for a pattern you might have done that might not have been the healthiest, and said, hey, I'm working on this, and you have to let go of that resentment for that pattern. Or it's a, hey, like, this is a new version of my wife that's kind of cool, because like I said, I've known him since I was 16. Like, 16-year-old version of him is very different than 30-year-old version of him.
Thank goodness, right? Like, thank goodness. And we have to stop and accept the updates.
Yes.
Do you have any tips or just thoughts maybe for someone who is in a tender place, a new mom or a new dad, whoever it is that's listening, who is starting to unlock some of these things, and maybe they're afraid to present that to their partner or to communicate that to their partner because there is some vulnerability, there's fear there. Is there anything that comes to mind for you for either the partner who is sharing changes or the partner who's accepting changes on how to really support each other through that?
I have so many thoughts.
Yay.
So, number one, it's interesting because, you said some vulnerability. There's a lot. There's so much vulnerability. First you have to accept your own changes within yourself before you can present them to your partner. I think that's a huge thing, because if you're still fighting against yourself, then you're not going to be able to bring to your partner and say, hey, this is what's going on. And you don't have to be like figured it all out, by no means, but if you can't even within your own self admit or accept that these changes are happening, then how can your partner accept that those changes are happening? So that's step one. But honestly, my biggest tip is to just talk about it and rip off that Band-Aid. And actually, my biggest tangible tip is to have hard conversations in the car.
Ooh, yeah.
This is probably one of the biggest things. One of our biggest leaps in our relationship happened whenever we went out for our anniversary trip. We got married in October, so our anniversary is in October, and we went out west last year, and we did this 10-day 6 national parks. Like, it was incredible, but there was a lot of time in the car. And I tell people to have hard conversations in the car because there are no distractions. And it's an enclosed, safe space, so that you don't have to worry about anybody overhearing you or anything like that. And you don't have to look at each other.
Yeah.
And it's not weird that you're not looking at each other. So you can say these things that, you can just be staring at the road and admit them. And then just let it float in the car, and you can be a little more vulnerable, I think. So that's something I preach all the time.
Yeah.
Throughout our marriage and our relationship in general, before we got married, I had this little pre-marriage workbook, and I'd literally be like, okay, we're going for a drive, and we'd do a chapter in the car.
Oh man, I think that's great. And you had shared earlier that your husband tends to need some space to internalize things. So still think the car is a great place to do this, but how do you not go crazy waiting for your partner to internalize and then be able to continue the conversation?
Honestly, that is just a big part of acceptance of knowing him. I'm, obviously within our own relationship, I've known him for a long time. And so I'm very okay now with silence, because I know that and I don't take that personally.
Yeah.
I used to take it personally. And I think that was actually going to be my next thing, is that when you are growing and when your partner is growing, I think the main thing that we can do to support each other is doing a little bit of our own work to realize that it is not personal. It actually has nothing to do with us, because I I'm going through all this stuff, and it is in no way a reflection of what my husband is or isn't doing. And I might be a complete disaster. And he, at first, when I was going through these changes, would take it personally. I'm like, you have got to stop doing that, because I need to talk to you about this. And this isn't about, hey, I'm upset because you're not doing anything. I'm like going through all these things and they have nothing to do with you. And I want you on this journey with me. I'm not saying you're not doing something. And the same with him, as he's going through things, or he'll get upset about things. It's our natural inclination to be like, oh God, like that's to try and fix it, or be like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not being enough. And kind of, I think it's a huge thing to take back that ego, because then we give our partners the space to become, to bloom. And then we can also accept and see and recognize that they are this person. And then it creates, when you have those hard conversations, which you absolutely need to have, and just get it out there, just word vomit, like you will end up coming out of those conversations and they are so uncomfortable, and there's a lot of like fear and crying and like, that's it, we're done, like this is going to implode our whole world kind of feeling. And then once you resolve all that, however long it takes, you come out on the other side going, wow, yeah, that's my dude, this is us, like we're great.
Oh, that's so good. So much to take from that, like ideas and validation for our listeners. So I am going to wrap us up. And this question almost seems silly now because you've given so much information, but I always ask this at the end. What is just something that you would tell your new mom version of yourself about either your relationship with yourself or with your partner in this season of after baby?
Oh, goodness. I honestly think one way that I handle the vulnerability is I always ask myself, what's the worst that can happen? And sometimes that answer is pretty intense. But when I face the worst that can happen, like what's the worst that can happen if I tell my partner, all of this inner turmoil? What's the worst that can happen if I go to therapy or anything? Once I face that thing and say, hey, I can get through that, then it makes the doing of the action so much easier. And the doing will always serve you. Even if it's a lot messier than you think, it will always serve you. So just do it.
Oh, so good. So good. Where can people find your podcast, your mission, and just connect with you and learn more about how you share this story, which is so important?
So I am on Instagram, probably one of the only social medias I actually got the hang of at the moment. And so my brand is the Supported Parenthood RN. And so Instagram is at Supported Parenthood RN. And then I also have my website, supportedparenthoodrn.com. And then my own podcast is the Supported Parenthood RN podcast. There's a theme here. So, and my podcast, I do 2 episodes every month, and it's on Apple and Google and all the platforms and stuff. So, and then I'm always like, I love connection. So people like come talk, just explore, share. So
yes, awesome. And you guys, just since you're already on your podcast app listening to this, go straight away and maybe start with her relationship episode, because her and her husband talking together is just so sweet and relatable and so good. And I think that people are going to get just comfort and validation from that as well. Jordan, it was so nice to spend time with you and get to hear even more of your story and glean some of your mama wisdom. And I know that there are going to be some awesome takeaways, and we will stay connected. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, I want to invite you to explore coaching with me. I help my clients identify where they are, where they want to be, and what is standing in their way. And then we get to work changing mindsets, altering patterns, and developing the communication skills, connection points, and personal confidence you need to live the life that you want to be living and you deserve to be living the fullest version of yourself for your own experience and for your family. I offer a free 15-minute exploration call where we just chat about where you are, where you want to be, and whether coaching is the route to get there. You can schedule that free call at bit.ly/WTFChels. That's bit.ly/WTFChels. And I cannot wait to chat with you.